I was really apprehensive about sewing this design. Look, this top has a diagonal button placket. My buttons are sewn through the placket. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and I have some neat sewing to share with you today. This is the Lincoln top and it's a brand new pattern from Love Notions, and it's a super wearable style that has a relaxed fit, a drop shoulder, made for knit fabrics, a round neckline that is finished with binding. For the arms, you can either make it sleeveless and finish that with a binding or make it 3/4 length or long. The most interesting feature that you see in the line out here is that diagonal placket. So it's not just that this placket is on the side seams and it's just straight up and down. No, the front has a width under the armhole and then it goes slightly narrower towards the center. That means that the back is slightly going forward like that. I think the fact that this detail is slanted towards the front makes it more visible than if it was just a regular side seam that had this feature. I think that's really clever. The longer length version that you can choose will reach the high hip or the mid hip. Depends on how tall you are. There is a shorter version where the front is shorter than the back. So there the feature of the placket I think is more apparent. This button placket is totally functional if you want it to be. You can sew the buttonholes, sew your buttons, and then you can open it all the way up to your armholes basically. So you can do that if you want to, but it is an optional feature. You can perfectly just sew all the buttons through. The buttonholes aren't really needed for you to be able to get into your garment. You know, it is a decorative feature. But if you enjoy sewing buttonholes and you want to do them, you can do them or you can not do them. It's up to you. Because the Lincoln is a brand new pattern, it is 25% off during the first week. You can find my affiliate link down below if you'd like to use it. When you use it, I get a little commission back from there and that helps support the work that I do here on YouTube. In a tag in this video, you'll find all the sewing that's going to help you put it together. If you think it's really hard, it's really not. I think it's beginner friendly. So just check out the description box down below for all the details and all the information. You do need knit fabric, as I mentioned. This won't work with a woven fabric. Your fabric doesn't have to stretch that much. It's only 25%. So if you take a piece of your knit and lay it against a cutting mat and take 4 inches as a reference, if you hold on to the end near the zero, stretch your fabric nice and comfortably and it goes up to 5 inches, that means it's stretching an extra inch. That means it's got 25% stretch. So that is fine. You won't need anything more than that, although I think you could have a little bit more than that. I think that is the bare minimum that is going to work. So you could use cotton French terry, rayon French terry, cotton lycra, sweater knit, maybe a double brush poly, and also athletic knits. I throw them in the mix all the time because I think the ones that are more medium weight are just good for anything you want to make. So I always throw them in the mix. You know, I would have made one with an athletic knit if I'd had time to make another version. I've just made one and it's Ponte Roma. I'm putting an asterisk key on the Ponte Roma. It just depends on the type of Ponte Roma. Some are not made the same as others and you'll find different compositions. I think if you find one that has rayon in the blend, it would be a nicer result and not so stiff and a little softer on the skin. So just be careful with Ponte Roma. That is the fabric I've chosen actually. Now the fabrics I haven't mentioned here are the really lightweight drapey ones. I don't think the placket is going to look very nice, even though it is partially interfaced in that area. It's just not going to look very nice. I can imagine it being made in a rayon spandex and it being all floppy and not hanging very nicely. So just be careful with very, very lightweight knit fabrics. The sizing goes up to a size of 5X and a hip of 59.5 inches. There is a standard bust and a full bust option. Always remember that the full bust option doesn't just add a little bit of extra circumference to the bust, but it also adds it to the waist and to the hips. Consider that you probably have a looser fit around the waist and the hips if you choose the full bust piece. In my case, I just sew the standard bust piece because my high bust to full bust difference is only 3 inches. This is not meant to be a super fitted top or a super oversized top either. You have about 4 inches of positive ease at the bust and the high hip. Remember, if you're doing the full bust option, you have 6 and 6. And when you are looking at body measurements in the chart, the ones that are most important are the bust, the waist, and the high hip. The full hip is not considered here because the top does not reach the full hip. If you take your waist as a reference and measure maybe 3 inches below that and measure that circumference, usually around where your abdomen would be most prominent, that is sort of the high hip. And there's 2 ways to choose your size. It just depends on how you want to wear your top. There is a paragraph there that explains it. And basically, if you want to wear your top with the buttons always closed, you need to choose your size based on whichever measurement is the largest. The thing is that you can't really blend sizes with this pattern because of the diagonal cut lines of the front and the back. For example, if your bust and waist fit in the M size and then your high hip is size L, then you would make your garment size L so that your high hip fits and everything fits. But if you want to wear your top with 1 or 2 buttons undone, which is perfectly doable and it also looks really cute, then you can choose your size based on your high bust, like you usually choose your sizes. But then you wouldn't be blending out to a larger hip. You would basically be getting more ease at the hips by having the buttons undone. So have a think about how you want to wear this top. I've chosen size extra large based on my high bust. My measurements actually fit into one size, so I should be fine to wear it open or closed. You know, it'll be the same thing for me. If you are very particular about how long you like your tops, I would suggest you know what length that is exactly so that you can measure your patterns and you'll know right away if you need to adjust. I added 1.5 inches to my top to the long version, or else even the long version would have been too short for me, and that's just because I'm taller and I'm used to making length adjustments. I've chosen the sleeveless version, but I did adjust the sleeve and add 1.5 inches to that also for when I make it later. When it gets cold in the winter, I'll probably make one with sleeves. Of course, I have filmed some sewing for you, and it's basically centered around how to put this placket together. Probably different to other garments you've sewn. I had a lot of fun with it. Easier than what you think. And I'm so happy the amount of fabric consumption was so low, and that's what makes me love a pattern. So let's hop into the sewing segment of all my videos, up close and so personal.
Don't you think this is starting to wear on me? You've been rated down like hell. I'm weak.
This is how I'm going to cut the front and the back piece from the same length of fabric. Now the back piece looks really wide and the front piece is narrower. What I've done first over there is put the front on the fold right here at the armhole area. It's right up to the edge of the selvage, and then you have a bit of fabric there. So that means that I can overlap a bit of the fabric from this fold that comes over right up to the edge. So both pattern pieces are basically touching right there, and I have managed to put this one on the fold as well. The other way would have just been to put the whole fabric on the fold, cut the front and the fold, and then add a center back seam, which is something I'd like to avoid just because of this pretty print. I'm going to make this sleeveless, and this is all the fabric I'm going to need. It's going to be less than a yard, and I'm making extra large. These are the two main pieces for the Lincoln top. The front, you can see, is smaller. It is cut on the fold there. You can see that it's slanted and it's narrower than the back. The back is also cut on the fold, but they will overlap, and on the body, the placket is going to look wider underneath the armholes and then come narrower towards the front. So that's why the slant is there. Now on the edges, you see some black area. That is just some area I've interfaced with black so you can see it. I could have used white interfacing. In any case, you won't see it, and the interfacing doesn't reach the bottom. The hem area will not be interfaced. I want to show you the shape of these hems. This hem comes out a little like that because it's been true to this slant right here. So when we fold this up, you can see that the edges are going to have the same length at the fold and above here. That's why when you're cutting your interfacing, there's an edge that has a little bit of an angle. Just make sure you cut it just like the pattern is. And at the back, it's different. You can see that the shape is going inwards, so if we fold it like this, it matches perfectly. So don't think it's an error. It is supposed to be like that, and it's really good to see that these hems are trued like that. I really like that. For now, I've just got my paper pieces there for the binding. I'm going to look for a lighter weight knit to do the binding with. I think this Ponte is a little thick for it. Now this Ponte is not like other Pontes I've used. It's really soft. It doesn't feel as stiff like other ones I've used in the past, and I really like this print. When we open our pieces, it's going to look like that. The next step has got to do with serging, and it's from this edge that's interfaced all the way down here, serge the hem, come up here, and then all the way up there. And we do this with the front and the back pieces, the same thing. Okay, here we have all the edges serged, side seams including the hem. And now to finish this, it's really easy. All you need to do is fold the hem right sides together like this. And I'm going to do it from this side because I can see my interfacing. I'm going to put a pin there. And all we need to do now is sew on the edge of this interfacing. It's 1 inch from the edge, following the same shape here. I've got the hem folded that way, right sides together. And then after sewing this seam, we can flip it. And this is just a straight stitch here. Okay, so you can see the seam on this side better. And now all we need to do is flip this, and that's how these corners are going to be finished. Now these corners are not 90 degrees. They do have an angle, actually, if you look at it from the bottom. So this angle is an obtuse angle. It's greater than 90 degrees. It's not straight at all. That is how this is going to be finished. And then you would have a fold of 1 inch for the hem and the fold here on the side. This is where we have the interfacing. I have already done this on the back piece. You can see there, I folded my hem up and sewed it right there, 1 inch, following the shape of the interfacing. You can see it's a slant. You can see the angle that it forms there. So they aren't really straightforward that you can just do the traditional mitered corner here. You can see that there's quite a lot of bulk in here. Cut a little bit low from there and just cut it like this. And then tuck it back in, and now it's much better, much flatter. So look what I'm taking off from the corner. It's like a little roundy bit. The other side as well, just a little below there, and just take some off. Now on the front we also have a different type of excess because of the different type of angle. We have this poking out from under here, so the fold is actually a little diagonal in there. I definitely don't want this there, so what I'm gonna do is cut from here just this little piece, and then that's fine and you won't see anything. Same as on this side, just a little piece on the top. What I've done here is just give it a quick hand base, huge stitches. This area where the buttons are gonna go, there's no stretch because of that interfacing, but at the bottom where you have your hem, you will have stretch. So that's why I want to top stitch with a twin needle. Even though I don't need it for this area, I think it'll look pretty and it'll also be nicer for the hem. I really don't want to sew a straight stitch on a stretchy hem. This is the back piece. You can see the double notch of the sleeve there. That's how you can quickly know what you're working with. Later we'll need to snip into this area, but it doesn't need to happen until after we've top stitched. With the front it's different because at the top of the placket you see that this is folding over by 3/8 already. This is an area that also needs to be snipped in, but I'm just going to go ahead and top stitch first, have it fixed there in place, and then I'll do a little snip. So you only want to top stitch up to there. You don't want to go up further than that. I have my pin marking there where I need to start and stop. The fold is about 1 inch, so I'll just make sure I'm top stitching a little smaller than that so I do catch everything. Over here, if you were doing a straight stitch, you would just stop there, pivot and keep going, but you can't really pivot with a twin needle. But I do a type of pivot. What I do is lift the needle a tad just to get it out of the fabric, and I lift, I move the fabric on its own underneath, and then I come down and then I keep going. That is my fake pivot with a twin needle. Okay, that's where I want to pivot. I'm just going to lift the needle a tad, just get it out of the fabric, move your fabric around. And here's my pin telling me where I need to stop. Okay, now that I've got this secure, I'm just going to go ahead and snip into there. This is going to be the seam allowance for the tiniest side seam we'll sew later. And it's the same over here. I've done the exact same thing with the back. Remember, the back just has the raw edge extended, not folded in like the front. And now from the edge here, from this little corner, we're just going to snip here 3/8 of an inch. And this is going to be the seam allowance that is going to sew both of these tiny side seams together at a later stage. But this is the front piece, everything's top stitched. And now at this point we would mark buttonholes. These are my buttons. Now it depends on what length you're making it. You know, you might have a different amount of buttonholes, or it could be personal preference also. In my case, I've chosen to have 6, and the distance between them is 5.5 centimeters, which is about 2.25 inch. And that's how I've placed 6. The last one is about 2.5 inches from the bottom there. So if I move these out of the way, you'll see I have a pin marking the distance, and I've drawn a little line with a friction pen. This is what I do if I was doing the buttonholes, but I am a very practical person. These buttons are decorative. The placket doesn't serve a purpose of letting you into the garment. All I wanted to do now was mark them and know where they are going to go, but at this point you would do your buttonholes. Don't be concerned about buttonholes on knit because this is totally stabilized. There's zero vertical stretch here, so it's basically like sewing buttonholes on a woven. If this was a functional placket and I needed it to get in and out of the garment, then I would definitely sew the buttonholes. I have nothing against buttonholes, but I am very practical with them also. And if I can get the same look without the buttonholes, I'm gonna go for that option. I might consider making this button and this button functional, so the last two I might do the buttonholes there so that I can have the option of opening those buttons up if I wanted to, but definitely all the ones that go up to the armhole, I'm not going to do buttonholes for. Now, before sewing the shoulder seams together, I have already serged the edges. I've done that for the back piece also. So now all that needs to be done is align these shoulder seams and sew them. I'm going to be pressing my seams open. Now I'm interrupting here. I'm about to sew the little tiny side seams that we have on both sides. And if you are making a version with sleeves and you like setting your sleeves in on the flat, this is when you would do this. You would set your sleeve in on the flat before sewing your little side seam. And then that would be a continuous stitch that would catch the seam of the sleeve and the little seam right there. But because I'm doing mine sleeveless, I'm not doing that. I'm just sewing the little seam. And even if I was doing the sleeve, I would still do what I'm showing you because I like to prepare my sleeve separately and then sew it in on the round, usually as one of the last steps. So that's just a little intermission for you before we hop back into the sewing. Remember to subscribe if you are enjoying all this sewing content also. Okay, remember we'd been snipping into these seam allowances. Well, now this is when we sew this little seam together. So it's from the edge here, the armhole, just right up to there. I'm going to get in there with my serger and also finish this, making sure to keep this out of the way. I can't leave that raw there. And here is the other little side seam. We are looking with the wrong sides out, as you can see. Here's a little seam that we've just sewn. The seam allowance is free there. And now we're going to take the placket from the back piece and overlap it over the front. You can see the seam is right there. Now, how are we going to know quickly which is the front, which is the back? Just look at your buttonhole marks and you're going to know that this is the front. And of course, if you've done actual buttonholes, then of course you'll know. So I'll just take the back and overlap it over here, and I'm going to put a few pins. There is going to be a bit of a raw area there, but again, this is a knit, it's not going to fray. So I'm going to fix it in place there, but I actually want to top stitch this from the right side of the garment so I can actually see what I'm doing. If I try to sew this down here, I don't know what's going on the other side, and I'm not comfortable with that at all. So I'll just take these pins out. What I'm going to do is just hold this down with some quick hand basting, and then I'm going to flip this to the right side. And this is how a placket's going to look. This is the armhole there. This is where the placket starts. That's where the first button's going to be. And now this is where I did all that basting. I want to hold this down and sew a little rectangle just to keep that in place from moving. Pivot again. I'm sewing a tiny rectangle basically. Okay, so here we have our armhole, our tiny side seam, our little rectangle, keeping that placket in place. You can see how it closes it here. And you can see that the back comes from underneath the front when you look at it from the right side. But when you look at it from the wrong side, it's the back overlapping over the front. I am going to end up making one buttonhole, just the last one, and that's going to be functional, so I can have the option of having that button done or undone. That's how it looks. It's really neat. I'll just open it up, and now I still have all my marks to sew on the button directly through the placket, but that one will actually have a button. So I have to be really honest, I was really apprehensive about sewing this design. I didn't think it was going to suit me, but I was very open-minded to trying it. And I have been trying to be a little bit more open-minded and not be so square in my thoughts about the types of garments I prefer to sew. So basically when I saw the line art here, I really love the feature of the diagonal placket. I think that's really cute. But then I thought, you know, it might be really boxy on me, it might not suit me. We'll see. You know, the only way to see is to actually sew it and put it on. And when I tried mine on, I was so happy. You know, it's not really boxy, and I think the fabric is amazing. Ponte Roma, I brought from Chile this summer. Any fabric I buy from Chile is really special to me. I definitely did not want to use the Ponte Roma for the binding because I just think it's too bulky. So I used a denim look cotton lycra that I use for everything. I didn't change the sewing method that you'll see in the pattern. It's very simple. It's when you sew your binding onto the right side of the garment and then you flip it inside. Instead of leaving a raw edge there, I serge it so it's nice and neat, and then it's top stitched. Very, very simple. And this is the original armhole. If you are making a sleeveless version, there isn't a separate armhole or cut line to do that. It's the same armhole that you would use if you're using a sleeve. And it's fine, it's really covered, it's nice, really nice. It's not too dropped, and it's nice and covered over here. I'm really happy with that. My buttons let me down a little bit because they're not too big. I think if the buttons were bigger, you would see them more. But here's the little side seam, and then we have 6 buttons. I think in the pattern you have 5, but because I added length, I know I have to add an extra button anyway. I mentioned that I was very open to just sewing my buttons right through because you don't need them to be able to get into your garments. I mean, I love doing buttonholes. If I'm doing a blouse or a shirt dress, you know, I'll do them. I love them. But I'm very practical also. So this is the only functional buttonhole if I want to wear it with that one undone. You saw that for my version. There was basically only 2 main pattern pieces. The rest were just little binding pieces. So I was able to get it from one length of fabric at extra large size with a nice wide knit. Very small amount of fabric consumption, and that is awesome. On the shoulder seams, they are pressed open. This is just best practice for me and Ponte Roma. I don't like having them together because it's too bulky. Here you can see the binding is very neat. And then the placket area. Look, I might go back in there and do some hand sewing to cover that raw area there. There is actually no way you can go back and serge that. You know, it's such difficult access, you know. I really enjoyed sewing it because it was something different. Let's see it on. I've just paired it with my denim glissando skirt that goes with everything, just out there in the backyard. This is my new Lincoln top from Love Notions, size extra large. Here you can see me undoing the last button of this diagonal placket on both sides. I love this Ponte print, it's super comfortable, and this top reaches a high hip length. There is another version that is cropped. Here's a closer look at the placket. I have 6 buttons on each side. It's all very neat. My buttons are sewn through the placket, except for the last one. There is an actual buttonhole there. The top is not too loose or boxy. I'm very happy with the fit. I chose the sleeveless option, and there's a nice amount of cover here on the arm. I've got the scoop neckline. There is one that's slightly higher. I think this is very nice. I like this depth, and I have binding inside. Very neat. I'm super glad I tried this new to me style. I had a lot of fun sewing it. It's not hard at all, and it's a different style, different techniques, and the best thing is that I used less than a yard of fabric, and that is golden. I had a lot of fun sewing it. I think it's something different, and I always enjoy sewing something different. You know, I mentioned I don't sew basic tops. I don't sew basic t-shirts because it's boring. But this was not boring. This was different, and this was fun. I think this pattern could work for the whole year. It just depends on your fabric choice. I know later in a few months when it's freezing here, I'm going to make it with long sleeves in something cozy. For now, it's 100 degrees. It's just so hot. I couldn't fathom doing anything but the sleeveless. It's just what works for me now. So that's what I've done. Don't forget that the Lincoln top has a discount for the first week, release week. You can get it for a little bit less. And my affiliate link is always down below. Remember to use my code at checkout, Karina10, and you'll get an extra 10% off on top of the sale price. So don't forget that, because that's a little bonus for you who watch my videos. For you who've made it to the end of the video, I hope a lot of you, I'd love to know what your stance is on buttonholes. You know, would you have done the 12 buttonholes just because it's in the instructions? Or would you have just not done them? I mean, I'm really interested because I'm really open to not doing them. And it's not that I don't like them. I'm not going to fall into that cliche of saying buttonholes are so hard. Like, I don't do that. You've never heard me say that in this channel. I will do 100 buttonholes if the garment needs it for function. But if it's not needed for function, it's just decoration, you know, it depends on my mood. Sometimes I'll sew buttons right through. I'd love to know what you think about that. Am I being too rebellious? Let me know. That's all from me today. Have a great day and happy sewing. Bye.